My previous recording got cut off because my laptop just decided to shut down. But we were at the point of connecting our MongoDB database to our Node.js application. And to do that, I was saying that this URI link that we have gotten from our MongoDB database connection, you need to substitute not only the word password, just make sure you're paying attention to this part. You need to change the pointed brackets as well. So you'll erase everything, including the pointed brackets, and then substitute that with your password. So my password was test user 123 with a capital U. Okay, try not to have another at the rate here because in your password at the end, because it might confuse MongoDB as to if it's your password or if it's the end of your password declaration, right? So I changed the word password along with the opening and closing pointed brackets to my actual password that I had set while creating my database. So this is now my connection link that I got from MongoDB, and all I had to do was substitute the password placeholder. My username was already there by default because to MongoDB that is no secret. Now after this, let's see what's in our given sample code. Yeah. Okay. After that, you are going to use this Mongo client variable to make a connection with this particular URL. So you're using this Mongo client uh, yeah, here we go. Mongo client class, and you're using it to make connections with your MongoDB, okay, with your Mongo database. So we are going to create a new variable called client because this is what we'll use to make a connection. This is who we'll refer to while connecting with our database, okay, and you'll see how. So we are creating a constant variable client. So now we can reuse this variable client, but we can't reassign its value. We can call out to it with any of our const variable declarations. We can call these variables, okay, but we can't change their values once they are declared here in the beginning. For example, just a reminder, if my client was a number 123, later on, if I try to reassign the value of my client variable to hello, when I try to run this code, if I try to console log it, this will give me an error. Since I have set the value for my variable whose declaration is constant to be a number, integer number 123, I cannot reassign its value. So that's what const is for us, right? Now to this client, that variable that we've created with the const variable declaration, we will call our Mongo client, this class that we have imported, which we got from our MongoDB database module. And within this, within rounded brackets, we will pass our connection link. And now when we refer to client, we can make any changes to our database. We can connect to our database. We can get all of our previous entries and so on. So within this now, let's create a function that gets called and runs every time our code is being run. So what I mean by that is let's create an asynchronous function, and I'm going to call it run. Okay. And when server, currently we are not making an application with a front end with any EJS files. In today's class, we are just focusing on MongoDB. So all that we have is a server.js file and this MongoDB module imported. So when I try to run this server.js, my JavaScript file, if I don't want my connection to my MongoDB to happen right away, okay, and I it's an a it's sorry, what I'm trying to say is that since it's an external resource, we want to make sure we are using async await, so our code doesn't proceed until our connection has been established and we have some value returned to us. Okay, so to do that, I created an asynchronous function within which I'll use the await keyword. I think we use it later when we are trying to do other actions, but we'll eventually use the await keyword when we try to perform any actions on our database. Okay, so because any actions that we're trying to create or perform with our database, like create, read, update, or delete, it has to go establish this connection with our MongoDB collection, and then do that particular action. So for that reason, we will use async await. So once this function has been created, you need to make sure there is a call so that it gets run. Okay, so for our regular, just basic MongoDB queries that we are just going to write, this is our general structure. Now, all of our uh, connection, our queries will all go within this asynchronous function. So before we do that, we need to create a collection. The way to do that is, let's say const collection equals to client.db. Okay, so it'll make a connection. Client.db will make a connection with the database that is linked to this cluster, whose link we have provided to our client variable. Okay, now within this, we need to specify our cluster name. I remember mine being simply cluster with no number that follows. If you don't remember your cluster name, then just go back to MongoDB, and whatever, when you click on database, you see a name here. This is the name that you need to enter over here. So client, when you make a connection with this URI that has been provided to you for this given username and password, inside this database, we have a cluster called cluster, right? Now within this, we are going to call a collection, and this is the collection that we want to create. Now you might wonder that, well, our database is currently empty, so how can we specify a collection? Um, the nice thing with MongoDB is when you're trying to code like this, if your collection is not already created, okay, I'm gonna open this window a little bit. You see our collections are empty. If I click on browse collections, there are none. So if we try to specify a collection name here, for example, student collection, what happens is when I run this code, this collection gets automatically created the first time. So it's not like every time I run this code, a new student collection gets created. It's not the case. The first time you run this server.js code, if this collection doesn't exist in the specified cluster in our database, then it'll automatically get created the first time. And thereafter, if you run your code again and again, if it's able to find student collection, it will perform the necessary actions on it. So if your collection isn't already created, it will get created right away when we run that code. We haven't done that just yet. Okay. The next step is at the end of this, once you've made a collection, all we have to do is client.close. Client.close. And the reason you always need to have client.close when you're using MongoDB is because you want to make sure that that connection has ended once you have established it. So far in our given code, all that we are doing is we are creating this collection. Okay, we haven't started performing any actions on the collection yet, but we'll try to run this code and see how our collection gets created. Okay, but at the end of it, we don't want our server or our function to keep running and running. We want it to close as well so that we can proceed, or that's the end of our code, really. Okay, so proceed to the next topic is what I meant. So at the end, once your collection has been created, the connection has been established, we end it once our work is done. So let's just read through these steps. We imported the MongoDB package. We created URI that points to our MongoDB server. Okay, we created a client using that URI provided, that connection link provided. We created an asynchronous function that we made sure is called at the end. So when we run server.js, this actually happens or takes place. And within this asynchronous function, all that we did is created the collection. So inside this function, we use the client instance to connect with our given databases cluster. And within this, and we try to connect with a collection inside it called student collection. And now once we run this, student collection is currently, it currently doesn't exist. But once it is created, okay, if we ever add data to it, if we ever want to do anything to it, all we have to do is call this collection variable. So all of these variables are the reason we've set it, or the reason we've declared it with a const, is because we never want its values to change. So if I've made a connection with my MongoDB database in line 3 and 4, And if I'm calling upon that here, thereafter, if I perform any actions, I want to make sure this is the collection that I am selecting. This is where I want to add some data or update it or fetch some data and read it or delete. So now on, when we try to perform any queries, we can simply call this collection variable and then add to it. Okay, so yes, I think that was it. Let's try to run this code. Hopefully it runs correctly. We will debug any issues that arise and see where we're at. So just to check one more time, our collection's empty. There is 0 collections. I'm going to select my server.js file, go to run and debug, and select the run and debug option in my Node.js environment. So the first time you're running this code in your project folder, VS Code will ask you what environment you want to select. So select the Node.js environment. And you'll see that what happened is that it ran and then it stopped running, right? I can see run and debug again, but there is no error either. What happened is it real quick, it ran this code, the function got called, it made a connection with this database inside our function. It created the collection that's necessary, and then it terminated its connection with the database so that it doesn't just keep running and running unnecessarily. Once its job's done, we end the connection with our collection. Let's go back to here and you'll see a refresh button. Let's click it. Our database collection. Oh, it got no, it didn't. 1 second. Browse collections, and we have an issue. It's okay if it's not showing up right now. I think what the error might be, or the reason we are not seeing a collection right now, is because we did try to create one over here, but we've not added any data to it, so it's not showing up. So if we try to insert some data into this collection and it still doesn't show up in our database, then we'll try to look into it further. But for now, our code ran successfully. We didn't see any errors in our debug console. So let's move on to the CRUD functionalities in our database. So there are, as I mentioned, there are 4 main important functions that you need to keep in mind while working with any backend technologies. Create, read, update, and delete. Its MongoDB query equivalent is for create, we are saying insert. For read, we are saying find, and update and delete is pretty much the same. So with MongoDB, you have the option to insert, find, update, and delete either just one entry